not sure I'm going to take on the mantle of the master of endowment, mainly because that doesn't sound like a very fun person. But I can tell you that one of my goals today is to take those three barriers: time, expertise, what was the third one? Resources. Oh, we're going to just trash those. Those are not going to get in your way because you control the most important element of building endowment, and that is the relationship with the donor. So here's what we're going to do for the next couple hours. We're going to talk about that conversation with the donor. We're going to talk about where we are, where they are. We're going to talk about barriers that they have in thinking about this, and we're going to talk about what we know about donors. I'm going to share some data that's out there, and then we're going to get to the conversation with donors. So we'll cover a lot of ground in the next 2 hours. I'm going to be around in the last part of this morning. You're going to have a table exercise where you work with others at the table, and you're going to identify your top barriers to building endowment. Okay? And I want you to be realistic about that, because I don't want to hear any excuses. I want you to think about things like either whether it's volunteers or, how to organize the words or how to cultivate or manage donors, things like that. But we're going to make this a part of what you think about and do every day. So, I think that talking to donors about endowment is less about endowment. We're going to let me just stop there with that word, endowment. There's a barrier. There's a barrier in and of itself. I went through an exercise and I looked up a definition for endowment. And you've never seen such boring definitions, and you've never seen definitions that were more all over the board. One of them talked about a bequest from a dead person's estate. That was really how the definition started, and I thought, first of all, they need a better English teacher, and second of all, that's a little grim. Another one talked about a dowry for a woman as an endowment, and I am still waiting on mine. I'm not yet seen. And still others went on and on, but the word itself is a hurdle. You realize that, don't you? And every donor you have has a different definition. So many times I talk about these as permanent funds or resources for long-term mission. I spend more time using words that describe how it functions than using this dictionary definition. And I would suggest that you do the same, because your donors and even your staff are not on the same page about what it is. An endowment is a pool of funds set aside for the long-term use of the organization, the earnings of which are used to advance mission. It's not an operating reserve. It's not a rainy day fund. It is a pool of funds permanently committed for long-term use of the organization. But I want to focus you less on the legal, the technical, and more on the conversation, because it's all about the donor and their vision and their passion for your organization. And the conversation itself is magic. It will help you build stronger relationships with your donors. It will get you focused on things that will not only positively impact your annual giving, but your long-term giving, plan giving, and endowment building. They focus you on the relationship with the donor. And that's why they're so powerful. But if you're going to be talking to donors, you have to understand the environment that they're in. You have to understand their fears, which in a very interesting way are the reason you're all here. It reflects your fears about the future and resources and the pressures that are on you. So we want to talk about how to really take your organization in these conversations from transactional to relational. And we will talk more about what that means in a bit. So we're going to also talk about the best prospects, how to talk to donors about significant gifts, whether those are today gifts or tomorrow gifts, how to expand the current conversation with donors beyond annual gifts to deferred gifts, how you listen for opportunities, how you follow up with conversations, and do it in a way that will make you successful. Is that fair? So you can tell we're going to cover a lot of ground. Let's go. Let's look first at what that environment is. And look at this. I'm going to share it with you from the donor's lens, but I also want you to think about it from your own situation and what you're struggling with and what that means. First of all, the stock market. Don't try to read these little bitty numbers. In your handout materials, I've got every year for the key indexes from 2000 forward. I was in the banking business in the 1990s. I sold investment management services, among other things. This was a very hard job. Why? Remember what the markets were doing in the 1990s? They grew like wildfire. I want to say the S&P was up close to 500%, NASDAQ up about that much, the Dow up 356%. My dog could pick stocks. Anybody could pick stocks. And so who needed investment services? It was really a period of unprecedented growth until it wasn't. And in 2000, 01, and 03, the markets tanked. And we made some recovery, and then before we knew it, it was 08, and the world was ending again. And we have been on that roller coaster ride since 2000. Even earlier this year, what did you see? You saw the Dow drop 2,000 points. And here's what it does to your donors. It makes them very nervous. They are not sure that they're going to have enough resources to make it long term. So if they're telling you they don't have resources, don't say, oh, sure you do. Because they're not feeling that. It doesn't matter whether they have $100 million or only $100,000. They're all feeling the same pain. If I came through 08 and I lost 20 or 30% of my asset value and I lost my revenue because interest rates are down and have stayed down, I'm feeling the same kind of pain that I am if I don't have that many resources, and the same thing happened. So what else is going on? Since the first quarter of 09, our prime rate has been 3.25% until the middle of December of last year. So from 09 to 2015, 3.25%. And it moved in December of 2015 to 3.5%. At the bank, they're putting out the balloons and giving the toaster away with a return, if you go out 3 years, of about 0.4%. Maybe a little better than that, but it is much better than that. So all your donors who are older, who depend on fixed income, everybody who's depending on the bond markets for return is feeling the pain. Then what happened? We got new tax act. The American Taxpayer Relief Act. There's somebody in Washington that is paid to write these bill titles. They're always so optimistic. But this was not a very happy event, because at the high end, income taxes went up to 39.6%, and capital gains taxes went up from 15 to 20%. And in addition, and it wasn't part of this law, it was a previous law, the ACA imposed a 3.8% health care tax on income, and the P's limitations, that is the 3% reduction of your itemized deductions, those had disappeared and they came back. So your high-end taxpayer, let's just think about capital gains for one, was at 15%, is now at 25%. Because capital gains taxes are 20, plus the 3.8% ACA, plus the 1.2% reduction equivalent of your itemized deductions. 15 to 25%, that's pretty hefty, 67% increase in that tax. At the same time that the income tax increased about 27, 28%. That's rough. So they're feeling that pain. Here's a slide where I show you the difference. Federal tax increased for the high-end taxpayer 27.34%, and for capital gains for the high-end 66.67%. That's just brutal. Then there are other things going on in the markets. We have investment fraud and theft, not just Bernie Madoff, but there were investment managers all over. I'm still picking up the paper and reading about it every day. There was one of them from Texas that actually jumped out of a plane over Birmingham. Oh no, they found him. He just, yeah, that's a curious way to avoid prosecution. Just my personal insight. Retirement plans are not as full as they once were. Why? Because the markets are not driving them up. In the 1990s, I used to worry that people would have retirement plans that were too large. We don't worry about that anymore. Other factors, we have people taking care of parents and taking care of children. An Uber driver picked me up at the airport. I love Uber. It's so nice. I mean, anyway, I love this. Anyway, I'm talking to the guy. He's got a 29-year-old son still living with him at home. I have friends whose children are still living with them. And at the same time, they're taking care of parents. So, a lot of pressures. What about from your point of view? What's happening to you? Why are you here in this room? You're here because the markets are roiling around. And if you do have long-term investments, you're not getting the returns that you used to get. You're here because government grants are disappearing. Federal, state, local. Why? They can't afford to support you anymore. They love what you do, but they don't have money anymore. And because it's getting harder and harder to raise money. Why? Because of what I just shared with you about donors. They're being very careful about giving money away during your life because there are a lot of pressures on them. And yet, they still are giving. Giving USA, we've got new figures coming out next month. But Giving USA for 2014 told us that $358 billion went to charity. Billion. And of that, 80% came from individuals. If you think your money is coming from foundations and corporations, I know that looks easy to you, but it's only 20% of the money. Your real opportunities are with individuals. That's who's giving the money away. So I just remind you that so that you will be familiar with it. Also, I've got a slide in here, you've seen this. They give all over the board. Go find your area of charitable impact, whatever kind of organization you represent, and you can get a sense of how much money there is. But here's one other thing you need to understand and you may not realize. Only 30% of all donors itemize on their tax return. Did you know that? 30% nationally. I do a lot of speaking all over the country, and I was up here in Morris County, New Jersey, about 12 years ago, 15 years ago, a long time ago. And at the time, USA Today had those little survey boxes in the lower left-hand corner. You remember that? So I'm off the plane on the way up to Morris County, New Jersey. There's this little box. It's the wealthiest counties in the country. And lo and behold, Morris County, New Jersey, #2. I thought, this is good stuff. I'm going to the right place. So I'm up there talking about charitable giving, and somebody raised their hand and said, look, you're confused about something. We're poor up here. We have, you hear the violins. We have high taxes, high cost of living, all this. And you're from the South, you people are nuts. You give all your money away. So you need to go back and talk to them because we don't have any money to give away up here. And I thought, you know, USA Today is not a very authoritative source. I don't think I'm going to stand on this one. So I moved on. Well, it wasn't 4 months later, I was in Atlanta talking to another group about giving, and literally somebody stopped me again and said, look, we're down here in the South. We are poor. We are so poor down here. I thought you would understand that. You need to go up there to the Northeast. Those people have all the money. And I thought, it's more than I'm there. So I went to look for data, and lo and behold, the IRS has data on all this. They take all our tax returns and they parse them. They can tell you state by state. So in Connecticut, I can tell you that the number of people in Connecticut who itemize higher percentage than the U.S. as a whole, because you do have higher taxes and deductible items. So 41% itemize, and of those, 83% take charitable deductions. And on those charitable deductions, in 2013, it came from a recent, I think that's 2013 numbers, from 2014. They're good, they're just not real fast. Anyway, you deducted, your citizens on their returns deducted over $3 billion. A lot of giving going on in this state. That's the point I'm trying to make. A lot of giving. Here's the other thing that's important for you to know. 89% of all households give to charity. Let's think about that for a minute. 89% of all households give to charity, and yet only a small percentage of those itemize. You need to treat everybody that you see like I do. I treat it. They're breathing, they're a prospect. Just remember that, because you can't tell by looking. And whatever program you set up, you ought to encourage every single person to impact the future of your community and your nonprofit through an endowment gift. If you just make this an exercise for the wealthy, you're going to miss a lot of people. So, there's a lot of research out there. I'm just going to hit the highlights of it. But if you have not, if you're not familiar with the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, you need to go there. You need to go there because they do research on an ongoing basis. High net worth individuals, they update that every 2 years. Women, baby boomers, special issues. It's great research. It's all free. You can download it. and it's actually intelligible. It's easy to read. You will find that it is very helpful as you begin to think about marketing, communication, endowment, because it talks about why people are motivated to give, who has the capacity to give, how they think about it. Let me just share a few things. First, from the High Net Worth Survey, these are really people, the top 3% of wealth in the country. What they found was 15.6% had an endowment fund. 15% had a donor advised fund. 12.6% had created a charitable remainder trust, lead trust, or charitable gift annuity. And 6% had a private foundation. You know why I give you those particular stats? Because they're investing long-term through these gifts. Long-term, they're thinking about the future. They are willing to invest in long-term impact. See, in our transactional worlds we live in, that's where every charity starts. Here's what I call a transactional world. You frenzy every year over annual fund. You have special events. You look at your donors, look deep in your heart, you know this is true, as ATMs. Oh, a bunch of little ATMs. And every January 1, you start over. It is the hardest way to raise money that I know. It is the hardest. And as you mature in your fundraising program, you become relational rather than transactional. You begin to build relationships with donors. You understand why they are there and why they are giving. You understand more about their passion for their organization, and you do it because you're having conversations with them. As you begin to build endowment, this is a relational type of exercise. And that's why I say, as you begin to have these conversations and you become more donor-centric, you are going to understand and have more about why your donor gives, why other donors might give, and you're going to see more consistency in giving. What the Lilly School says, if I don't have this slide, go find it. Donors who have invested in your future through a bequest or gift under their will give twice as much annually as those who do not. You know why? Because they are invested in your long-term success. They look at their gifts as investments. Whether they are making a current major gift or a deferred gift, that has nothing to do with what you want, but more to do with what works best for them. Either way, they look at it as an investment. Of these high net worth, 75% volunteered, 45% serve on boards. 75% gave because where they feel their gift made a difference. If you take nothing else from the information that you will find at the Lilly's research site, you will learn that donors give for impact. They give for outcomes. They don't give because you're struggling. They don't give because you want it. They don't give because of the size of your budget. They give to have a personal impact. So as you're talking to donors, you need to be in that gear with them. I cannot stress how important it is. And I lead a lot of groups through this change from transactional fundraising to relational fundraising. And it's hard. Why? Because you want to go in with your list of things that you want to tell them how hard life is and you've lost your grants and annual funds getting harder every year, and so you need endowment so you won't have to worry about that. If that's what you're thinking about as a case statement, you're going to have the hardest time you can ever imagine raising funds. I want you to just banish that from your head. banish it. That is the internal case for why you need to be out there building endowment. It's because you're perpetual. It's because it is getting harder year over year to raise annual funds. And when the economy tanks, you lose revenue sometimes from prior year because you're losing grants, because you have greater needs. When our economy is struggling, we have more people in need, right? So at the very worst time for fundraising, we've got greater demands. That's what I call the internal case for support, why you need an endowment. That is something your board needs to understand, your staff needs to understand, because it's going to help you prioritize your time. But if you want to think about why donors should invest in endowment, that is a totally different case statement. That is what I call the external case statement. Why should they invest? To perpetuate the impact, because what you do as a nonprofit is critical to the health and quality of life of this community. And they can ensure that that quality of life continues. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference in those lenses? In these conversations with donors, you need to be listening to them. What is their dream for this community? How does your organization help further that dream? That's what I want you to be talking to them about. What else did we learn? Only 48% have a will. This continues to shock me, but I know this is true. There are a lot of people that have not noticed the trend that I have noticed in demographics. And we seem to be finite. And there's a beginning and there's an end. And if you have assets, you need a will to direct where they're going. Because if you don't have to worry. The state of Connecticut has a will for you. Yeah. You're not going to like it, but they've got one. They've got one, and yet only 48% of people have wills, even among the high net worth. Highest frequency of donors, that is, where do you have the largest age group of people giving? 40s and 50s. 40s and 50s. You probably already noticed that, but that's the highest peak in their wage earning years. They've sort of taken care of a lot of the big ticket items they had to take care of when they were younger. Now here's the other thing, because I believe deferred gifts and endowment are closely related. Why? Because a lot of people can't afford to build your endowment during life. And you want them to give annual gifts to support your operations. But that one-time gift, they only die once, that one-time gift is a way to perpetuate their annual giving if you add it to endowment. And so I believe the two are tied. The endowment gives them context to make that bequest gift because they can begin to envision how it's going to be used. Here's the good news. They did a bequest study of both high net worth and non-high net worth. And what they found was 1/3 of those surveyed would be willing to consider a bequest if asked. Where do you get odds like that? That's pretty powerful. So we tend to tiptoe around this. It's going to fit into our conversation. I'm getting there. Getting there. But 1/3 would be willing to consider. And here's the other startling thing, I suspect. When you look at the group that had a bequest in place, look at these bands. They're in your materials. 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds. They already have bequests in place for you. We tend to think about this as something that we only need to talk to old people about. People like me. How did I get to be an old person? We think we're going to wait till their 60s or 70s, and they're just now thinking about it. Wrong. They think about it much earlier, and if you wait until their 60s or 70s, you already have gone to the bottom of a long list because other people have been talking about it. For those that did not have bequest in place and would be willing to consider a bequest, same thing, 30, 40, 50. In fact, for the non-high net worth group, the sweet spot was in their 40s. For the high net worth group, the sweet spot was in the 50s. And that is younger, so that affects your marketing. Here's the other thing that may surprise you. They had demographic information about those that they surveyed. And they were talking to people with income less than $25,000, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100, 100 up. In all income bands, they were willing to consider a bequest. So I want you to get out of your head that it's old rich people you need to be talking to, because remember my motto, if they're breathing, they're a prospect. Thank you. I want y'all walking out of the room saying that. We also know that there's going to be a huge transfer of wealth coming up. In the survey that they did at Boston College, they covered something like, I don't see the years up there in your materials. It was a 52-year period. If wealth grows at 2% year over year, 41 trillion is moving from one generation to the next. If it grows at 4%, it's 136 trillion. So there's a lot at stake. I want to give you one other little lens into individual donors before we move the conversation. You assume when you're talking to donors that they are all squared away in their estate planning and that they've really thought through their goals. They have not. Let me just tell you, they have not. And worse, their estate planners that they are working with make these three assumptions, and a lot of your donors kind of follow the plot because everybody assumes this is what you're supposed to do. Number one, the assumption is you're going to leave everything to your family, to your children. I can tell you I have a lot of conversations with donors, a lot of conversations with donors. And I meet plenty of donors who do not want to pass everything to their children because they don't want to take away their incentive to be productive on their own. Bill Gates only leaving $10 million to each of his little Gateses. Now, I could do with 10. That would certainly be a boon for me. For one, Delta Airlines and I would not be so closely tied at the hip. But that's what I would get. I would get a private plane. So I could just parachute where I wanted to go. But Warren Buffett only leaving a small amount to his children. Plenty of people have decided not to leave their children a lot. So this assumption is wrong too. Second assumption they make is that everybody makes decisions for tax reasons. Taxes are a benefit. They want to know about them and structure it to maximize the tax benefits, but they don't make decisions based on taxes, and we need to quit talking about that so much. Third, you assume they've prepared for the conversation with their planner, and they've not. And my husband and I had an attorney when we first got married. We had a very simple will, what I call I love you wills. I leave everything to my husband. He leaves everything to me. We had no children. We really didn't have a lot of assets. But as we had children and began to think about guardianship and assets and things such as that, we needed a new will. So my first estate planner retired. I got a new one. And great guy, somebody I'd known from the estate planning world for a long time. And I called him up. I said, what do we need to bring? He said, just bring a list of assets. You know all this stuff. I said, okay, so off we go. I bring my list of assets. We spent the next hour in his office just answering these rapid-fire questions about Q-tip trust, other types of marital trust. We had 2 boys, an engineer and a drummer. Isn't the gene pool funny? So, one, and I'm not saying which one, was just fabulous with this money. The other one, born for a trust. So, we had to have that discussion. And I was exhausted at the end of the hour. And when I got my draft about 6 short months later, we did change attorneys, I realized that we had not talked about a lot of things that were important to me. I want to take care of my parents if anything happened to us. I had a sister with a child that needed some help that I wanted to take care of if I could. And I had charities that were frankly in my first will. He never asked me about those questions, those gifts. Isn't that stunning? We had to start over because I wasn't prepared for that conversation. So one of the things I do is give donors a worksheet if I'm going to sit down with them. And it's just simple, 3 columns. In the middle column, I talk about what they might need, like providing enough money for their spouse, for their children, for themselves to make it through. Maybe they want to provide for children. If they do, how much? Maybe grandchildren. Maybe they have a dad like I did, and I was worried about dad running out of assets if anything happened to me. I have a sister, as I mentioned, and I have charities that I want to support. So I put the most common reasons in the middle. If it's not at the back of your materials, then I will send it to Liana, and she can share it with you. It's a simple worksheet. Because I want them to think about the things that would be on the very last page of your text handouts, not at the back of the PowerPoint, if it's there. Let's just, somebody will flip to the last page. I'd like to know whether, no, I don't see it. I'll send it to y'all. But, so the middle column is all these providing for care of extended family, charities. One of the things on my list is support the U.S. government. Maximize your support to the U.S. government. What's my point there? Taxes. If you don't do any planning, for those people in the 52% group that don't have a will. So that's the middle column, and I give them some lines to write their own goals there. In the left-hand column, I ask them to put it in the order of priority, because you can't always do everything you want. And in the right-hand column, I ask them to quantify how much it's going to cost. And if they don't know, like how much it's going to cost for health care, to go to somebody who can help them figure that out. Because they will not go past those first couple of items if they are worried they're not going to have enough money. Used to work with a lot of widows at the bank, and what I learned was that they would have $8–10 million. It was back in the day of only a $600,000 estate exclusion and a 55% tax rate that started at $3 million. So they had $8–10 million, and they were in their 70s or so, and I'd start talking to them about making the $10,000 annual gifts. Now it's $14,000 a year. You could make to as many people as you'd like, no tax consequences. And they would always say, oh, honey, you can't do that. I might need it for the nursing home. And after I heard that about 25 times, I finally figured out what they were saying. Their number one priority was having enough assets to take them through their lifetime without having to ask anybody for money. And so they didn't know how much that was going to cost, and until they dealt with that, they could not move on to making these $10,000 gifts, even though they knew they were going to pay 55% of tax on those assets. So what I would do is just do the present value calculation. We'd agree on an amount that it might cost for health care for the rest of their life. And at the time, I mean, well, I used a number like $200,000, which was ridiculously high at the time. Still, hopefully a little high, but maybe not so much. Anyway, I do the math and I say, good news. You can live to 167. Isn't that great? And they would laugh and say, oh, honey, I'm not going that far. So we could quantify how much they needed and then they could move on and begin to make those gifts. Do you see what I mean? You think they're ready for these conversations, and they're not at all ready. And the estate planners aren't helping them. So this is a worksheet. If you can use it, share it with them, let them get ready to see their planner. I use it, I do donor seminars, and I'll give it to them and tell them they don't need to know anything about taxes. They just need to know what their priorities are, because they're the only one that can set those priorities. Here's one final thing I've learned. You have to kind of realize where they are in their economic life. And I just made this chart up, so don't look for a source. But I made it up based on my experience. Here's what I found. When you have people who are just out there in the world, they're just starting on the economic ladder, they've got their first job, they're getting married, they're having children, they have private school, they have to buy a house, all of a sudden they have vacations, they have camps, they have private school they have to pay for. They are only thinking about income because they don't have a lot of it and there's a lot of demand. You're not going to talk to somebody that is in that stage of life who's going to be interested in giving you their assets. Okay? When they get to be about 40-ish, and these are arbitrary numbers, people go through it at different times, then a lot of times they're making more money, their income is caught up and exceeded their needs, and they're beginning to invest their personal assets long term. Why? Because they don't need the money right now, they're earning it. So long-term investment. Then they get to be about 10 years before retirement, and what they begin thinking about is, oh no, what's going to happen to me when I don't have earned income anymore, when I fall off the income shelf? What am I going to do? So they start bringing the investment horizon of their personal assets in a little bit and begin to think about what's going to happen. Then they reach retirement age, and best I can tell, they lose their minds. And they begin to think only about income. Again, I'll give you an example. I was working with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. A man I've known for many years, loved this man. And he was very active in a charity, he had chaired its board, he was stepping down and he was just getting ready to build endowment and plain giving. He wanted to make that his deal. And he personally wanted to make a big gift. So I'd been talking to him. I wanted to meet with he and his wife to plan this gift. And it was hard. We were never in the same place at the same time. Finally, we had a day. But I learned a little bit about his assets. He had about $20 million in assets. $17 million was in the stock of the company where he'd been CEO, and it had virtually no basis. I mean, $1 basis. And it was worth $17 million, so a lot of gain. Then the other asset he owned was a piece of property that he had bought out in the country, we called it, and the town had kind of grown that way, so it appreciated, and he had a little farm out there, and he raised cows. Now, I'm from Alabama. You would think I would know my cows, but I really don't know my cows. I do not have a real thing in my heart for a cow. And he loved them, though. I mean, I had to get with the program because he loved them, and he carried these pictures of them. and they had spots, you know. I was supposed to appreciate what kind of cows. Apparently, very valuable cows. And they reproduced. So we've got appreciated stock, appreciated land, and this herd of cows that it appreciated. And for me, for gift planning, I am in pattern. I can do stuff with this. I've got appreciated assets. So morning we were getting ready to, we were going to sit down the afternoon that morning. I was doing something for his board. And he said, I cannot wait to talk to you. I got ready last week. You'll never guess what I did. You know what he did? He sold his stock and bought tax-exempt bonds. And he sold his farm and cows. All my appreciated assets, gone. And I was stunned. I said, what? Why'd you do that? Who'd you call? Did you call your lawyer, your accountant? Oh no, he called his broker who thought it was an excellent idea. And I said, well, tell me, tax-exempt bonds? He said, yeah. Isn't that great? It's going to produce, and he told me how much income. I said, does it really cost that much for you to live? He said, oh no, that's 3 times more than I need. But isn't that great? And I thought, here we go. He had been retired 3 years, always thinking about his income again. People make a lot of financial decisions in that time period after they retire. Big opportunity for you to get to them. But I hope in at least giving you that background, you understand when I'm talking with a donor, I kind of want to know where they are. My husband and I had children a little later in life than a lot of people. My mother and dad were in their 20s, early 20s. My husband 40 and I was 31 when we had our children. So it's not like they moved through these ages at the same time, but if you will listen to them, you will figure out where they are in their economic cycle. Okay, so now we're getting to the conversation. And I cannot start this without telling you that the most important thing you need to think about and be really good at talking about is the vision and mission of your organization. And I don't mean some rote or some non-energetic statement, wordsmith statement. I mean, how do you impact lives? What are the needs out there? Where is that place that you see your organization going? And I want you to think about it in a way that will impact lives, because that's what's going to drive these gifts. The impact of what you do, the vision that you have for the future of this community, that's why they're going to support endowment. They're going to support it because it is important to them. And it's important to them that future generations have the quality of life that they enjoy. So if you're not real comfortable talking about your mission and vision, if your board isn't real comfortable, if your staff isn't real comfortable, you're not going to have a very easy time with this exercise. I look at donors as partners in your mission. If you do a good job in building a relationship with them, it will be by positioning them as partners in your mission. It is a word I use with donors. I engage them in mission. That is a very different thing than engaging them in budget management. And too many of you are trying to engage donors in budget management. You go in and tell them what your grocery list is. That's not going to inspire long-term giving. That's your responsibility. That's what you do with the annual fund. You raise enough money to operate. These are gifts for long-term, and they need to reflect your vision. They're not going to give because you give them an opportunity. You understand that there are 1.5 million charities, about close to 1.2 that have 501c3s, 300,000 or 400,000 churches and organizations that don't need a 501c3 letter. 1.5. They have lots of choices. They can give overseas. They have lots of opportunities. So it's not the fact that they can give to you, it's what you do that is important to them. They make choices every day. They're already making a choice if they support you annually. That's a choice that they've made. They've already prioritized you. You need to understand they're raising their hand and saying, you are important to me, because they're not giving to every one of those 1.5 million. You probably have in Connecticut, what, 10,000 charities? At least that. You can go look it up. A lot, a bunch. And they're giving to you. In 2008, one of the things I noticed, trends with donors, I told you they kept giving through the hard economic times. I would work with donors who would have maybe 10, 12 charities they supported. After 2008, they didn't quit supporting charities, but most of them cut their lips in half. 8, 6. So if you are one of their 6 or 8, my point is, you're important to them. But they give because they believe in what you do. They give because they believe they can make a difference. They give because they believe a dollar that they give to you will take them further, will have more impact than a dollar they can give other places. And there's nothing more important than mission and vision to drive endowment giving, because this is giving for the future. It is giving in a way that they will not even see today. A lot of them, especially those giving through their estates, they're giving to the future, to people they'll never see. I want you to look at your mission and vision statement, and I want you to create a mission or case statement, actually, for your endowment. Why should donors invest in the future of your organization? I taught a 3-day course on endowment once, a couple of times. 3 days is a long time to hold forth on endowment. So we did a deep dive in a lot of areas, including case statements. And I went out to the internet and I was looking for case statements for endowment. I looked everywhere. And I really didn't see a lot of compelling statements. A lot of them were aimed at, we're struggling with ups and downs in the market and ups and downs in donor revenue. I mean, not inspiring at all until I found this one. And this came from a 1922 campaign. A man named Ray Lyman Wilbur. Sounds like a good old Southern boy. But he was the president of Stanford University. And here's what he said. Stanford University is making a new decision which will determine its future for all time. The university has reached the limit made possible by the Stanford fortune. If it is to go forward and upward, it can only do so through the support of every member of the Stanford family and the public in general. Stanford will now take its place among the great universities of all time. Why do I like that? It has urgency. It is compelling. It has a vision. And most importantly, it takes the donor by the collar and it says, I am talking to you. He is talking to the faculty, to the donors, and to the community, everybody. And he's saying this vision of a great university is not going to happen without you. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Not a 5-page tome on how great you are. I want to see short, pithy, urgent, compelling, visionary, and clearly takes the donor by the collar so that they see themselves in that future. Does that make sense? And I want you to think about if you build a case statement like this, it's very donor-centric. This is very focused on the impact that the donor can have on this university. That's the kind of statement that you need. So, and you need to have it everywhere. Every time you sit down and read something about endowment, I want to see that as part of your story. So very, very important piece. The internal statement, which I was talking about before, really focuses on you, your needs. And this is important. This is what your board needs to embrace. This is something you need to embrace. Why are you even here today? Why are you taking time out of your day? Because this isn't optional. It's not optional. Do you know in 2011, 250,000 nonprofits lost their tax-exempt status? 250,000. Now that was the direct result of the Pension Protection Act. It required small nonprofits to begin to file returns. If you didn't file them for 3 years, you lost your status. Some of them this happened to by surprise and they got it back. But most of them did not. And they truly did not have the resources even to go through the battle to get it back. You can't run that thin. You can't run that thin. All of you do play a critical role. So your board needs to understand this is not something you do in your idle time. If you get everything else done, after you finish the annual fund, if you have a little time left, you'll go sort of call on a few people. This has to be a priority. It has to be a priority. If it is not, it isn't going to happen. You'll constantly tell me, you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have the expertise. That says to me that you've not made it a priority. It's really not that expensive. You have the community foundation here as your expertise. They will give you that platform. They'll do gift acceptance, investment management, all the tough things. Talk to donors about creating gifts. If donors want to talk about the more complex gifts, they'll do it for you. That's not an excuse. All I'm asking you to do is talk to your donors about what's important to them. So here are the principles in play, and you've already heard me talk about this because it's a big deal to me. First thing I do when I come into an organization to work with them on major gifts or principal gifts or planned gifts or endowment, I want to know where they are in their fundraising maturity. Are they transactional? You're focused on immediate needs, on annual funds. You only want cash. I have a charity I'm working with now. Bless their heart. And the CFO would I could tell he was trying so hard to be patient with me. He said, we only want cash. It's easier. Quit talking to our donors about non-cash gifts. And I said, Mr. CFO, only 11% of their assets are in cash. If you want to expand the options and increase giving, we need to be talking to them about publicly traded stock and real estate and making a gift before they sell their company. Don't you want more money? Yes, I want more money, but I only want cash. And he began to complain about a big gift of stock that had come in. He said, we don't even know where it came from. And now he's going to have to waste his time tracking it down. And I'm thinking, oh, it's hurting my head. But they're in a transactional environment. And it's really hard to make the turn. So recognize it for that. But if you recognize there's a focus on immediate needs, all you want is cash, There's an emphasis on counts, especially on dollars. You don't do a lot of stewardship because that doesn't generate money, best you can tell. And donors feel like ATMs. They truly do. I had an organization that I had been supporting for 30 years. Every year I got a Dear Donor letter. And I just printed out, direct mail. And I don't feel like they know that I've been giving for 30 years. So I went and shared that with them. Told them that I would like a little more personal approach. Don't send me any more direct mail. That I want just a phone call to prompt me. You know something? They can't do it. They cut me off of direct mail, but nobody will call. Nobody will send me a letter even that says, Dear Kathryn. And I see this a lot. It's just a lack of understanding of how important that is to recognize, why wouldn't I acknowledge a donor that's been given to me for 30 years? They are a partner in mission. I want them to make them feel like that, so they'll keep giving. And so that I can open the door to ask for a gift that continues to impact the community as they've done all these years. Doesn't that make sense? And we lose it in a transactional environment. In a relational environment, you're more donor-centric. You're focused on the donor and what their goals are. You want to know why they're there. You want to know why you're doing it. I'll tell you one more story. Y'all know my stories. It's the only way I can illustrate what I'm thinking about. So, my dean at my law school, lawyers are not as bad as doctors. But they're pretty close. They're really tough in the donor category. So my dean wanted to know how to speak to other alums, and I was meeting with him a couple of times a year, coaching him on the donor conversation. And I could tell he was not hearing me, because every time we'd meet, he'd take a proposal that looked about like that and throw it down in front of me and ask me to make a big gift to scholarships. And every time I'd push back over to his side of the table and tell him I wasn't interested. And I was a donor. I was giving every year at law school. But he wanted me to make a big gift. So about the fourth time that happened, I began to fear for the trees in Alabama. He was just wasting so many. And maybe the same proposal he brought every time. But I finally said, Dean, why do you think I support the law school? Long silence, and he said, because we're great. We're going up in the rankings of public law schools every year. We're fabulous. We've got one of, he began to regale me about all that. They won some competition and all this. And I said, no, that's not why I give. And I waited. Finally said, why do you give? Which was the question I was trying to coach him to ask. And I said, I give because the faculty. When I was here in this law school, they were invested in my success. Their door was always open. I was lost that first year in con law and property law and contract law. And I was lost, and there was no stupid question. They wanted me to be successful. That culture was so important, and I'm talking to students every year who are in one of your classes, and that culture is still there. That's why I give. So, in scholarships, wonderful that you did that, not of interest to me. But if you give me a proposal about faculty excellence, then we have a conversation. And you see, I tell that story because we all make the assumption that we know why people give to us. You don't know. You have many facets of your program. Whatever you are, whoever you are, whatever you do, you have different areas of impact. And you need to know why you're so important to that donor. You need to know that. And the only way you can know that is by asking and listening. I had another client at a hospital, children's hospital, that had a donor that was giving to them from about 4 states away. and she was getting ready to come for lunch. She was going to be in town, and they were taking her to lunch, and I was going to be in town, and they wanted me to go with her. They said, "We don't know why she's giving." I said, "Well, have you asked her?" They said, "Oh no, we didn't want to offend her." And I thought, I'm more offended that you did not ask her. I mean, this woman, her gifts were going up every year. She'd been given about 15, 20 years. So at lunch, I asked her. I said, "You've got to tell me your story. You are one of the best donors I've ever seen. You are a great donor to this organization. You obviously have a passion for what they do, but you live 4 states away. I'm baffled. I know there's a story." She said, "Yes, there's a story." So I listened. When she was a young girl, her family was going cross country on vacation back in the days when we did that in a car, and she got deathly ill, literally, seriously ill going through that city. They rushed her to the hospital. It was 2 or 3 days of touch and go. They couldn't quite figure out what the issue was. They saved her life. And every night at the dinner table growing up, her parents talked about that hospital and how grateful they were that she was there because the hospital saved her life. And when she got old enough, she began to donate to that hospital. That to me seems like a need-to-know story. These are the kind of conversations I'm talking about. They will energize you. You have more to do than you can do in a day. I know every one of you do. And hearing these stories will make you smile, and they will remind you why you do what you do. So I believe building endowment is all about building relationships, which leads not only to endowment, but major gifts, deferred gifts, and more consistent giving. More consistent giving. Here's 6 things I've learned. Over the years, I don't have donors as clients. I only have nonprofits as clients, but when they get stuck, they bring me to the table, and I get to talk to their donors. I had a week about, I guess, 6 years ago now, where in the morning I had a conversation with a donor who was giving $1,000 to this organization through his estate. I was on the phone with him, little charity up in Washington. He had been a volunteer. And so I had this conversation with him. I said, "Tell me how you first got involved with this organization. Why do you give? What is it that's so important to you about this organization that you give?" Then I said, "What do you hope to achieve with this $1,000 gift? How do you hope to impact this organization?" And that conversation took almost an hour. He lit up. He was so passionate about this organization. You would have thought that he was changing the world, and to him, he was. He was. About 3 days later, I was in Atlanta with a donor. I'd been brought to the table because he had very complex assets. LLCs, LLPs, C Corps, S Corps. If it had a letter of the alphabet, he owned it. And he had different percentages of ownership in each. It was part of his business. And he was creating this organization's first endowment. And they needed help with the agreement and these funky little assets. So I was brought in, and the size of the gift was a little bit different. It was $100 million. And the light bulb moment for me was this, as I began to talk to this donor. I brought in because of the complex assets and the size of the gift. Do you know where I started? How did you get involved with this organization? Why do you give? What is it that they do that is so compelling to you? Then we move to what you hope to accomplish with a gift. And like a lot of donors, he was very prescriptive. He'd come in there with a list of rules. We're going to spend this much for the roof, and we're going to spend this much for this. And I said, Throw away the rules. Tell me how we're going to measure success. What do you expect to accomplish? And it totally changed the conversation. So then we began to talk about how we were going to measure success, what he wanted to achieve, so that I could say, look, the way that you achieve that is going to change over time as circumstances change. But the impact you want to achieve, that ain't going to change. So let's get that nailed down and then we can move on. And that took about 4 meetings with this donor to get through those questions. And only then did we talk about the timing of the gift, the form of the gift, and the assets we were going to use for the gift. You see what I mean? Every one of you in this room can have this conversation because it is all about the donor and what they hope to achieve through your organization. And if you need expertise, you've got a whole building full of it at the foundation. You've even got resources in this room. When I see this many of you talking about endowment at once, I love it because it means your donors, which support multiple of you, multiple combinations of you, if they're all hearing about the importance of endowment at the same time, it will help you all. It's not a race to get to a donor first. They're only going to give where they are connected and passionate. So you don't have to worry about competition. The only thing you need to worry about is that if you're not talking to your donors about endowment, they're going to think you don't want it. They cannot intuit that you do if you're not asking them to do that. I chaired a United Way in Birmingham, it was back in '06, a long time ago. And that year, our campaign was $35 million, which is a lot of money in an annual fund. And the year I was chair, everybody gets to pick a deal. My deal was endowment, because we were building endowment. We've been working on it since 1980. We had about $19 million in endowment, another 20 in commitments. But we were losing a lot of our biggest donors through mortality. So I made a lot of calls that year to ask my choir, my total donors who were giving $10,000 or more, who had been board chairs, campaign chairs, my insiders, my choir, to endow their giving. Okay? Simple ask. And the first 7 calls I made, insiders, mind you, 5 said, I did not know United Way had an endowment. And the second thing they said was, I've got my church, my synagogue, my university, in my will. I did not know United Way wanted an endowment gift. Taught me a big lesson. We need to be talking to our donors about that. Loyal donors are the most passionate. They're the ones who've been with you the longest. They feel like your partners even if you're not treating them that way. And if you thank them for the impact that they've had all those years and ask them to perpetuate that impact through a gift for your endowment, you're going to be in a perfect place because now it's their idea. You're acknowledging their interests, their passions. So here are my 6 things to remember. 1, donors love to dream. They have bigger dreams than you can imagine. They have big dreams for their gifts, for their communities. Help them dream. Help them be a part of that dream. 2, loyal donors are your most passionate. So when we're looking for donors, we're going to talk about that in a minute. If you thank donors, you anchor. Just opening every conversation with, I want to thank you for the impact you have had. You cannot believe how many lives you've changed through your gifts. Just that simple statement. It is true. They have changed lives through their gifts. That's what they've done. They hadn't balanced your budget. They've changed lives. Changed that conversation. Do not believe because they give small gifts that they cannot make big ones. Donors give often their first major gift through their estate. And I can regale you with story after story after story of donors who were giving $25, $100 for 20 years before they died and left $250,000, $500,000 to a charity. You underestimate your donors. Do not be hesitant because you're worried that you can't talk about double backflips and taxes. That is not the conversation. I write books on this topic. And I still will say to a donor when we get to that point, you know, I'm going to go back. You've told me a lot. You've given me good information. I'm going to go back and work on a couple of things that might be good solutions and come back to you. That's a great thing to do. You don't have to feel compelled to cough it up. I mean, go back, get resources, talk to people, get input so that you do take back the right things. You don't want to give them a wrong answer. I don't want to give them a wrong answer. I need time to think about it. So don't be afraid. Don't let that be an excuse not to be out talking to donors. And don't think about it as trying to block and tackle them to get them to do something they don't want to do. They want to be a part. They want to have an impact on this community. So remember that. Let's talk for a minute about how to identify the best prospects. This is going to come as no surprise. I've already told you they have a lot of choices out there. But here's what I'm looking for. Points of contact. Points of contact means how do they touch your organization? My number one point of contact, multi-year givers at any dollar level. I know what you like to do. You like to go get the rich people. You'll take those people, the Bill Gates in your community, and you'll go line up outside the door. But let me just share this with you. Just because they have the money does not mean they're going to give it to you. They need to have a connection. So multi-year donors, first thing on my list. People who come to events, people who serve on your board, people who serve on advisory boards. Your school, parents with students, grandparents with students, alumni. Your library, botanical society, members, long-term members. If they volunteer, if they're a docent, a museum, that's a point of engagement. Each of you needs to sit down and think about your 8 to 10 points of engagement, the highest points of engagement. What brings people into communication and touch with you? Then you need to run a report for the top donors on each list. So for example, I usually start with my multi-year givers. If I've got a lot of giving history, that may be 10 plus years of giving. If I've got a lot of loyal donors, I may move it up to 15. I'm looking for the top 200 or 300 names. I then am going to run a list of the people who've been on my board and advisory boards, the people who've been volunteering for the most number of years, people who've been members for the most number of years, people who show up for every special event that I do. I might run a list of people with multi-generational children, multi-generations of children that have gone to the school, if it's a school. You see what I'm doing? And I'm going to build an Excel spreadsheet, these 8 points of contact across the top, and every time I get a hit, I start by putting in alpha order the long-term givers on the left-hand side. Then I'm going to run these other lists, and I'm going to put an X in every column. I have new people who come in, I'll put them on the left side. And then when I finish, I'm going to count the X's. And the people, if I've got 8 columns, who am I going to see first? It's the 8X people. Then the 7X people, then the 6. Do you know why? Because I can pick up the phone to get a meeting with them, and I can say, Kathryn, you are one of our most faithful donors. You've been giving for 30 years. You've served on our board twice. You're a volunteer in the afternoons. I know that you have have seen firsthand the impact that we have on lives and the importance of this organization to this community. We're embarking on a project to ensure that we will be able to continue to do this going forward. And I need your leadership. And I need your input. May I come talk to you? Do you see how different a request for a meeting that is than picking up the phone, and I got these calls. Kathryn, Mary Jo and I would like to come see you. Mary Jo's the development director. We'd like to come see you. Do you have some time? What's this about? Oh, we'd just like to come see you. Well, I know what you want. I know what you want. And I am the master of no. I would say, oh, I would love to. But, you know, I travel a lot, and I'm not going to be here. And they'll say, oh, well, when will you be back? Never. I'm never never coming back. I'm, woo, wow, a lot of going. No coming. So sorry. You're not getting anywhere with me. But if you start by acknowledging the importance of my role in the life of your organization, and you tell me you want me to serve in a leadership role and you need my input, I know what you want. You want the money, but you want more than that. And you've acknowledged me as an important part of your organization. Makes all the difference. Plus, if I'm that engaged, then I am a better candidate to help you build for the future. Right? Because I have seen the impact of what you do. I do believe in it. That's how you need to build your prospect list. You need to start with the insiders. It will allow you to gain your confidence. It will teach you a lot about donors. It will be easier to have those conversations. So now you're ready to talk about the conversation itself. Before I go see a donor, I plan. I know why I'm there. I know what my strategy is. I know where I am in the donor relationship. What do I mean by that? The donor relationship, the donor engagement cycle is very simple. You identify, you qualify. If they're qualified, that is, they have the passion and the capacity. Then you cultivate, that is, you engage them. Then you solicit them. Then you steward them. Then you cultivate them. Then you solicit them. Then you steward them. Every call that you make on a donor, you need to know what stage you're in, because your call needs to be intentional. Second, I want to know everything I can about them, not creepy stuff. I'm not going to go to the grocery store and follow them around and see what kind of toothpaste they use. But I want to know about their family, what they do, what they're interested in. Do they give other places in the community? And most do, if they're giving to you. I want to know about them. I want to know about their relationship with my organization. How many years have they been giving? Do they come to events? And this brings me to this point. If you don't have a database that you are frenzying over, that is one thing that the Community Foundation cannot do for you. You need to track volunteer engagement, board engagement, membership, volunteering of other kinds, event attendance. Why? Because it's points of contact. If you just track the dollar amount they gave and the date of gift, and that's all you know, you're hurting. You are really going to be at a disadvantage. And so start today to use that database. Begin to build the information. This is all around you. They tell you. They tell you about their area level of interest through this. So use it and pay a lot of attention to it. As you call on them, I believe in the integrated call. If I'm out talking to a donor about a major gift, and you need to do those in person, you're going to call the donor, you're going to ask for annual support, but I am not leaving that meeting before I thank them for the impact that they have had all these years, thank them for their gift, and tell them that they are so important to our future that I want to ask them to perpetuate that impact. We don't know what we'll do without them. Please consider including a gift to us in your will through your estate plan. Please consider, if you have an opportunity during life, a transactional event, sale of a business, sale of a big block of stock, sale of real estate, please come see us. We can show you how to perpetuate your impact for generations. So on every call that I make, I may be there to get the major gift, but I'm going to thank them and I'm going to plant that seed. Remember, 1/3 would create a gift if asked. They would consider it. Why not take that opportunity? I know you're all scared that if you go in there and you ask for both, they'll give to endowment and won't give to annual giving. Not unless you say that. If I go in and say your gift to our annual fund is so important, we could not do what we do without you. We could not do it without you. And so we want to ask you to perpetuate it. If they said, so you want me to give to endowment, not annual fund? I'd say, oh no. No, your annual gift is far too important. If giving to endowment will compromise that anyway, no, I won't. It's too important to us. But you may want to consider a gift to perpetuate it through your estate. What is that? That is donor-centric. It's clear messaging. I've been with volunteers and staff on calls where they were in an endowment campaign. They said, if you just give to this, we'll never ask you for any more money. That's heresy. You don't say that. What are you talking about? And I'm trying to kick them under the table, you know. You need to understand that donors have big visions, big hearts. I'm seeing more blended gifts, or what I call virtual endowments. Do you know what that is? I'll give you an example. Iowa State, the best job of stewardship I've ever seen in all of my life. And they had a woman who told her that, you know, Iowa State's a land-grant college. That means it's all about ag and human services or human health, something like that. I don't quite get it quite right. But you get the idea. Cows, they know all about their cows. And a woman came to him and said, I've left you $1 million request for music scholarships. Under my will. She didn't give him a penny then, under her will. So a year later, they went back to her and they said, you know, since this is coming in under your will, you're never going to be able to see the impact of your gift. So we wanted to share that with you. So you could know how profoundly this was going to impact lives. And they went out and interviewed music students on the campus and used their voices in this report to talk about the profound impact on their lives that music had and what it would mean to have a scholarship. She was thrilled and so excited that she began to give them the $50,000 a year that $1 million endowment will ultimately produce, so that that scholarship could go ahead and be awarded. It was actually several scholarships. So she gives them $50,000 a year. At her death, it's going to be funded and continue to give the $50,000 a year. She's actively involved in the award of those scholarships. She gets to meet the students. That is a virtual endowment. Think about what I just described. It's all about the impact she wanted to have. It's all about making that come alive for her, helping her see it. It wasn't about balancing the university's budget. It wasn't. And they truly needed more scholarships, but that wasn't what compelled her to give. Music was important to her. Having other people share that passion was important to her. When you make an integrated call, it's much easier for you because it's a time saver. but it's also better for your donors. It helps them understand what they can do. It helps them visualize what they can do for you. And it makes it one ask. If you go one day and ask for annual fund, then you go back about a month later and you ask for a deferred gift in their will, then you go back about a month later and you ask them to sponsor a special event, then you go back and you ask them a month later to give to endowment. You see what you're doing to them? That is ATM behavior. You're just hitting them up. And you know what they do? They've told me this. They hold back because they don't know what you're going to want next. Talking to them about their role in one conversation is more powerful. So, here's that slide I was talking about. Donors who give, have requested place, give more than twice as much annually. I've also done surveys, and what I find is they are more consistent. So they increase their gifts year over year at a faster percentage rate, a larger percentage rate, and they're more considerate. They're more consistent. So, all this to get to the real deal. How do you have the conversation? Well, you've already heard me say that. Number one, you start by thanking them. Number two, you learn more about why they're there. How did you get involved with our organization? When did you make your first gift? Why did you make your first gift? What is it that we do that is so compelling to you that you've invested to this degree in us? Now that conversation can take 10 minutes with a very succinct donor, or it can take an hour. It may take one visit to get through the questions. It may take multiple visits to get through the questions. The deal is, instead of talking, you're listening. Instead of pushing a proposal on them, you're listening. There will always be time for that proposal. I generally do not take a written proposal on my first visit because I've learned I make too many mistakes. I'm going to sell them short. And I want to tailor it. Because in my next question, especially if I'm talking to them about deferred gifts or endowment, as you look out over the next 10 years, what are our greatest challenges? What are our greatest opportunities? Why am I asking that? I want them to share my angst. I want to know what's concerning them. I want to know what they see as opportunities. And I want them to think about it. I want them to get down to that partner level and think about it. And then I'm going to say, what if I can show you a way to accomplish that? See how easy that was? And once they tell me, then I can come back, I can do a little brainstorming, and I can come back to them with a very specific proposal and say to them, you told me that you were interested in faculty culture. Here's an idea. As part of our long-term strategy, we have this dream. Will you be a part of this? Will you participate with us? I know this is as important to you as it is to us. So now, it's not my idea, it's their idea that I'm simply trying to bring to life. That's what this conversation does for you. We think we need to go in and sell them on what a fab organization we are. But these are insiders. They already know that. Quit pushing paper and listen. That's all this conversation is about. You adapt these questions to your own comfort level. We all have different styles. But if you follow this outline, basically, what it does is to help you learn about the donor and why they're there. you're going to be amazed at what you hear. It's going to make you smile to hear the stories. And you are creating a level of trust with this donor that cannot occur in any other way. And once they trust, they will talk. They will not share with you until they do trust you and know why you're there. But I have talked to absolute abject strangers before, and I have talked to close friends before, and used this approach, and you're going to be amazed at how easy the conversation. And here's the other thing you need to remember. If you're comfortable, they will be comfortable. If you are nervous as a cat, you're going to make them nervous as a cat. So the reason I developed these questions, I'm a rank introvert. That's just who I am. That doesn't mean I don't like people. I love people, but I'm a one-on-one. We're going to have a real conversation. I don't do chit-chat. It's just not me. So I was raised in the South. My mother had a big rule book about what nice girls do and don't. And, you know, some of it was table manners, but one of it was you do not talk to people about money. And so for me, as a volunteer going out to do this, scared me to death. And I had to find a way to be comfortable. And this was the way that I found to be comfortable. And as it turns out, this makes them very comfortable. And we could make a lot of progress. So, discovered by accident, but guaranteed to make the conversation easy. And that's what I want. Even if you're not quite ready to venture into endowment, I want you to start having these conversations with your good donors. Just look them in the eye and tell them thank you and ask them how they got involved and why they're there. Why they're there. Sometimes when we begin to wax eloquent, I begin, if I want to understand really about how they value success, I'll ask them about the best gift they ever made. Not the biggest, but the best. And then I'll say, why was that the best gift? And invariably, it is because they got a report on the impact and what it achieved. So that reinforces, I hope, that you don't just take the money and run. You give them feedback. You give them a report of the impact of their gifts. Now, once I get in conversation with a donor, I sometimes begin to hear objections. So in your handout materials, I'm not going to go through all of these, I've got some of the most common ones and how I answer them. You need to be prepared. Don't do the deer in the headlights thing where you freeze, like, oh no, a question, I knew this was going to happen. I want you to hear them. So here are opportunities. We are tight on cash. It's a tough economy. I don't know, I may need it. I would say, wow, in this current tax environment, and with all that's going on, I have found that for most donors, it is better to give appreciated assets like stock, because you'll not only get a charitable deduction if you itemize, you'll save the tax on those capital gains. Don't use your cash, use stock. And I'll give them a simple example of that. So you listen to them, you acknowledge them, but you give them an idea to overcome that objection. We would like a gift. We'd like to make a gift, but we're in retirement. We need the income. Uh-oh, do tell. What if I could show you a way to create a gift that pays you income? Those are charitable gift annuities, charitable remainder trust. All you have to know when you hear that is, what if I could show you a way to create a gift, pays you income? Would you be interested in exploring that? You can quickly say, I'm not the expert, but we work with the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, and they are experts. May I just have them share with you how that might work? Again, I'm keying to something that's important to them. They want to make a gift, but they need the income. So I'm listening. I'm going to bring that resource to the table. We're selling a business or a property, but don't want to give you all the gift. Not to worry. You can give us a portion of the gift. Do it before the sale to avoid the capital gains. Do you see what we're doing here? If you know some basic rules and can acknowledge what they're saying, but you know they have a passion for your organization. The beautiful thing about gift planning is, for anyone at any dollar level, I can show them how to make a gift that they can afford, any level. So that's kind of another little side item. You've heard me mention this. You need to make sure giving to endowment is accessible. I don't mean you're going to take $1,000 or $5,000 and create an endowment fund with it. Smaller gifts need to go into an endowment pool. But you need to help everybody understand that they have the power to change the world, because they do. I heard O.C.L. McCarty speak years ago. Do y'all know who O.C.L. McCarty is? Some of you may. Black woman, Mississippi, 6th grade education, washed clothes for a living. She understood something that I tried to teach my boys with some success, which is it's not how much you make, it's how much you save, or how much you spend or don't spend. She gave $200,000 to the University of Southern Mississippi for scholarships for women like herself. $200,000. Isn't that amazing? And you should have heard her. She was so full of joy about what she was able to do in the lives she would impact. And it changed that's where I walked away thinking, everybody wants to change the world, and you need to give them the power to do that. You need to encourage that dream, because they can all have an impact. Excuse me. Got something going on. I've had allergies, and I lost my voice actually 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to share that with you. Okay, so I have got a lot of scenarios. I've got a lot of scenarios that really, in your handout materials, I want you to look at. What I hope I've been able to do is to make you understand that this is really easy. It's not something to be afraid of. That if you will think about the impact your endowment is going to have on lives, if you will develop a case statement for endowment that is urgent, that is compelling, that is visionary, and that involves the donor, where they can see themselves as a part of transforming that future. If you will enter into conversations with donors, you will thank them for their impact. If you will quit talking about what you want and need and talk more about the way that your organization impacts the quality of life and the people in this community. If you focus on learning more about why they were here and what's important to them, the rest will take care of itself. It is really fun. It will help you understand more about how to talk to donors. It will help you listen to donors more effectively. You will find major gifts. Don't worry about the timing. I know you all want the money now, but that's what you want. Look for ways to help the donors achieve their dreams, maybe it is a virtual endowment. Maybe it's a deferred gift. The timing is really whatever fits the donor best. So go out, and I don't want to hear anymore that you don't have time, that you don't have the resources, and that you don't have the expertise. You hadn't heard me talk about anything that takes a lot of money. It's all about you. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. So, when we continue this conversation in the fall, and I hope you'll be back, we're going to talk about more of the mechanics. But I want you to already begin to have been having. I want you to start talking to your donors. I want you to start having these conversations.